Okay, and welcome to part 2 of the Autocar Dumptruck build. Now, if this looked suspiciously identical to the end of part 1, big surprise, it's because I filmed them both at the same time. Anyway, so in this second part, obviously going to finish the kit off, and when I'm done blabbing here, then, you know, the JPEGs and everything else. But as you can see, we are up to the chassis. I did not discuss before, but just real quick, one of the reasons why, well, two reasons why I had glued those front pins for the wheels in place was so that they were vertical, but also so the kit does not roll. This is a fairly substantial kit. It's got quite a bit of mass to it, and if it should roll off a shelf, you know, it's going to be a real bad day. So by having those front wheels locked, I know it's not going to take off on me. Now the rear wheels do move slightly. You know, since the front is fixed, I wasn't too concerned about how freely those rotate. I did push in on the hubs so that they're nice and snug against the inner drums. And just to show you that real quick, here on the rear wheels, those are the drums, are the brakes. There we go. And these are the brake drums. I should say that these are the backing plates for the brake. When you attach the wheels using the shaft, you know, it's just a press fit. So if you really want the rear wheels to rotate freely, just don't press that much and you won't bump up against that plate, and they'll spin smooth as can be. But since I wasn't looking for that, I put them in a little bit further. So they are pretty snug against the plate, which means you have friction, so it does not turn well. And there you go. So now I know my truck won't roll away from me. And with that said, now I'll go to JPEGs and we'll see some building. The engine, I built up all of the engine except for the pieces I do not want to paint. And obviously I missed a few pieces when I did my black primer spray. But yeah, gonna paint this guy up. And that's kind of where things are gonna go. I have some JPEGs for the wheel assemblies and whatnot, and take it from there. All right, so enough of that. Back to the build, and here we go. Okay, I thought I'd pop in here with a little modeler's tip. Now, this is something that I've done just a few times with this build, but quite a few times over the course of my various builds and whatnot. And it's one of these things, it's a simple little thing, but sometimes, simple little things can save you a whole lot of time and really kind of make a difference later on at the end of your build. Now, when you're doing spray painting, of course, there's big body pieces that you spray and, it's all straightforward. But sometimes you get into smaller pieces and you need to spray them. And there's the question of what are you going to do? You can leave them on the sprue, spray them, but then you have to clip them from the sprue. Of course, then you can do some touch-up paint. But, touch-up paint never really looks like a spray paint finish. So if it's an area that nobody's going to see, obviously then it doesn't make a difference. These are all pieces that are going to be out in open view, and these are the various equipment boxes, if you want to call them, on the side of the truck. We have the hydraulic fuel reservoir. This is going to be the what exactly do they call this? The muffler box here and the battery case here. And these things attach on the sides of the frame. They all come in two pieces, as you can see. But the pieces themselves, and you can see it a little bit here, I hope. You can see a little bit what's left of the nub mark, but the paint pretty well covers it up. So the question becomes, how do you spray paint them off the sprue without having them go flying when you go to spray paint them? Because pieces like this are so light, even if you distance yourself a little bit with the spray can, when you hit the spray, they're going to go flying. And, you don't want to start spraying, and on the third side here with the spray, it flips over, and now you ruin a side of paint. So the simple trick is get yourself some plain old painter's masking tape. This is Scotch Blue, actually. This is actually the masking tape I use when I do all my spraying. So, it's real good stuff, and it's really not that expensive for a big roll like this. But what you do is you peel some off, and I'll just do a little bit here. And you fold over one edge. This will keep it from curling quite as much, but also gives you a side now where your fingers don't stick. And what you do, which you could probably guessing from the outline of the other pieces I sprayed, you take your pieces and you can just stick them on there. And then when it's time to spray, you take the whole thing, you lay it on your spray mat or in your spray booth, wherever you do your painting, and you can go, and then you have the piece of tape that you can pull to rotate the parts. So once you're done and they're dry, you just pull them off and you're set. And the most you might have to do as cleanup, you'll notice right around on the edge of this against the brush, you'll see a little bit of paint that's stuck, but you take your X-Acto knife and not there anymore, is it? But then you can glue these pieces together, and you get a nice finished look to match with the rest of your spray job without having nub marks and possibly unsightly brush cover-ups. So there you go. Little tip, help you with your modeling outcome. So I will get back to work, and as you can see, the truck is progressing, and that's all for now. All right, back to some JPEGs. Okay, so I wanted to try to show something here, which if you watch any of my videos, I don't do things live on camera because I am a klutz working with a camera. There's very little space to move hands. Anyway, wanted to show these dry rub decals. Now, on quite a few Gundam models, they will include these. Now, just to go on a little bit of a tangent, you have self-adhesive decals, which you usually it's a vinyl sheet. You peel it off, has the adhesive on the back. You stick it on a model, self-adhesive. You have water slide decals, traditional. You cut it out, put it in the water, slide it on, position it, let it dry. But then you have what are called these dry rub decals, which come on a sheet like so. And I have the wax backing on there. You cut them out, position it, and then you rub it, and you pop the film off. Now, unlike water decals and self-adhesive decals, where the decal is on the top surface of your source sheet, dry rub decals, the decal is actually on the bottom of the sheet. So you'll cut it, you'll lay it sheet side up, which you'll know because it's the shiny plastic, and then you rub. And if I can pull this off, there we go. So you rub, and it doesn't take much. And what you'll notice is as you rub, the plastic sheeting, which starts off with sort of a gray cast to it, will start to turn clear, which means the decal is now on the surface. And once that's done, you pop off the plastic sheet and boom, your decal is mounted. That actually worked out pretty well. Now, in terms of pros and cons, pro and what I really like with these dry rub decals is you can see now this is white text on the dark green, but the contrast on these is just really great. They really stick out well. You do not get surround film like you do with a water slide decal. Certainly not, with adhesive decals have these horrible decal ledges, let's call them, where you can see the surrounding film. That's why they really kind of considered the lower grade of decals. Water slides, have a little bit of film around them, but usually once you clear coat, it kind of goes away. But with these, there's no surround film. There's only the graphic. So really nice. Now, a con, which is a fairly serious con with these dry rub decals, is, you only get one shot to position it correctly. Once you start rubbing it on, that's it. That's where it is, and it's not going to move. With water slide decals, you can work them into place and get them just right. If they start to tack, you put a little water on them. You can move them around again. They're very forgiving in terms of placement. These, zero forgiveness. So that's why I was a little doubtful I'd be able to pull this off. But, I have them, and like I said, some Gundam models from Bandai, they give you whole sheets of these things. I always keep them because they're great for doing these little details. As you can see, I also did on the hydraulic tank here. I put that on, the oil filters, the starter. So, it's one of those things where sometimes that little bit of detail can make a difference. So that's dry rub decals in a nutshell. All right, back to work. Okay, so I thought I'd jump in here for a minute and talk about some decisions in terms of putting together the cab. Now, you can see here I had some JPEGs for doing up the interior, and that I think came out pretty nice. Now, of course, anybody who's actually been in a dump truck would probably say, hey, I've been in a dump truck and the interior was never that nice. But, like I've done with a number of kits on the channel here, if the interior is there, particularly if the detail is in the interior in particular, I like to play with it and make of it what I can, even if it's not entirely accurate to what the real thing would be. But that's part of the fun of the hobby, is interpreting these things and detailing them up or representing them as you would like to. And with this, because I am doing the truck in a little bit of a more dressed up version, let's say, with a two-tone color scheme and whatnot, it's really not too far out of bounds. So if we're in 1/25th scale fantasy land where, somebody owns this truck, they went through the trouble of doing the two-tone paint, maybe they looked at the interior and said, I'm taking this truck to the upholsterer and give me a nicer place to sit. So, either way you look at it, there you go. Now, in terms of the decision making, with this kit, and AMT does this on some kits, they give you it's almost like an inverse of the interior, where all your windows are in one big clear piece. Now, this certainly makes installation of your clear a lot easier, because you put this up into the body, in this case the cab shell, and that's it. All your windows are there, and that's it. You're not trying to mount individual clear pieces in frames, which can be a little tedious and take a little juggling. The drawback is, if you want an open view into the interior area, let's say to see this nice interior tub that has been detailed, you don't have that option so easily. Your option to do that would be to insert to the body shell, make a guideline, and then cut that out. When cutting clear, you do have to be careful, when you're using a power tool like a small rotary tool, Dremel, whatever the case may be, not to go too hard on it, because you will start to actually heat the plastic to a little melt, and this will then easily either crack or fog up, and then you have a big mess on your hand. I was going to do that originally, but I decided not to, because I test fitted. There we go, test fit. But I test fitted, and one of the things I noticed right away handling this, and it may be a little tough to see, but this is quite a thick piece. So if I were to cut it, there would be a big ledge of clear along this door frame for the window, and I wasn't too keen on that, because that really wouldn't look so good. The other thing I realized when popping this in there, and I'll put it all together in a second, and you can see this sill of the clear actually locates your interior inside the cab shell, which is super important, because this is going to sit on your frame, and if you don't sight the cab shell properly to the interior tub, it's going to look crooked sitting on the frame, and then you're going to have a big problem. So popping this together, which is really super easy, and I have to say it fits in there very nicely. Looking at it, aside from the fingerprints I've now donated to it, you can see it's flush up squared to all the seams of the cab, and it is actually a nicely molded piece of clear, because it is quite clear. And aside from the windshield, which you can see has a little bit of a wave in it, and it does have the curvature, which would always, no matter how clear your plastic, is going to introduce some distortion. Even real curved glass in old cars did introduce some distortion when you looked in. But in any event, it sits in there nice and tight. And looking along, you can see now how that edge or ledge sits. And then your interior tub drops in there. And once you push it in, see, there's no wiggle room. There's no uncertainty there. It sits in there nice and tight. And looking at it in relation to the body, on the cab shell, you can see we have a good line there. So it's sitting pretty straight. Now the firewall does not look true because I realize I do have it on there just a tad crooked. I'm not going to worry about that because once I paint that edge and the hood, the engine hood sits on there, I'm not going to worry about that. And then looking through the windows, even if I were to cut this window out, you don't really have too much of a view in there. So it's enough to see the detailing that was done on the dashboard. In fact, let me get some extra light in here. All right. Ta-da. Let there be photons. Looking in there, the back window actually affords the best view into the cab, but it is, relatively confined unit. So even with the window cut out, getting a good look in there, you would need to get, quite a bit of light in there and then try to peer in through the opening. So, all things considered, seeing how the test fit goes, concerns about botching the cutout, making sure you properly sight the cabin, all these things together really leans me toward the final decision that it's better just to leave it the way it is. And, I don't have to worry about dust getting in there either. So, it builds up just fine the way it is. And as often happens with these AMT kits, you're working on it and it seems like, could catch some detail there, got to lose some detail there. But you work it up as you can, you assemble it, and it looks nice. So this is going to go together as is. And I will get back to the building, and until the next installment. Okay, and welcome back to the build. All right, now as you can see, got a lot of work done on the front end here, and we'll take a closer look at that. But wanted to talk in this segment, and the reason I jumped in here, not just to show where things are at, but some issues with the build. Now, let me go through these. Got a little list on the side here. I'm cheating this time, so I don't forget. All right, so we have our instructions here, you know, the step of 1,000 steps, as I call it. And you can see here, I had mentioned about using the highlighter to color in the step as you go through so you don't lose track. And you can see I've been following my own advice. How about that? But what I wanted to point out here is, as happens sometimes with some of these AMT kits, you know, your instructions tell you where to put things, but when you go to actually do the assembly, it's not quite exactly as clear as it would look. Now, one of the first things that popped up was on this side of the cab, you have a bracket for holding the lube refiner and power steering reservoir. But what I found, though, when I was working on the kit, there's not a single image in the instructions or on the box art of the driver side. All the views are from the passenger side. So I wasn't quite sure exactly how to locate this, and you know, so I went on YouTube and I watched a couple of other videos with this truck. I mean, I don't consider that cheating. I consider that using a resource. If you want to watch another very good build video for this kit, HPI Guy's workshop, he went ahead and did this, did a different take on it, very weathered used truck, but you know, a good build. All his build videos are good, so strongly recommend. But please don't leave my channel right now. So anyway, joking aside, so do keep in mind that you know, some of these things, while they show you where they go, how exactly they go, you don't really get to see. Now, you may say, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is you want to make sure you don't bind up on the fenders, and this will be a little more clear when I move the kit around, that you don't obstruct the hood. You know, you get one chance to locate these things. You know, you don't want to mess up your paint job. So that was that issue there. Now, another thing I ran into, the sump guard attaches to the bottom, and it says to side of frame and to inside bottom of frame. When I went to fit this, I could not get this between the suspension or around the front suspension, the leaf springs, to get to the frame. So I did a little reshaping on the legs here, the upper support brackets, you should call them, to get that to fit in. You know, again, not a big deal, but something extra to keep in mind. Really, I think they should have had you install this piece while you were doing the front end, because you could have sighted it based on the leaf springs, attached it, then continued with the suspension, and it would have been somewhat easier. Now, looking at the kit, I'm just going to remove the hood here so it doesn't fall off. Looking at the kit, you can see here, here's the sump guard, and it's a little tough because everything is black, and the blades go right down here. So it is nestled right between those front leaf springs, and they're supposed to angle out to the sides of the frame, which I just couldn't get it to do well. And I did want it to sit level with the frame, so I did a little trim work on the blades to get it to sit in there, and after that, you know, it popped right in, no problem. So, which brings me to something I had mentioned in the JPEGs, and that is locating parts because of misalignment issues. Now, I've talked, you know, several times in the first part, while the kit goes together well, now put an asterisk on that, because even though it goes together well, it does not align well, not at all. And that became It was somewhat of an issue when I did the frame. That was relatively easy to correct. But when I got to the front end here, it became a much more serious issue because now I had to line up the cab, the hood, the radiator, the fenders. These are all separate pieces. Now, if you had seen the video I did on the VW Samba bus, I mentioned in there that, when you have a multi-part body, you need at least one solid reference line or plane to work from. And using that, you can side everything else up and it'll go together okay, and you'll be true. Here, everything is sort of floating. And what I mean by that is the first thing that you get to attach is your cab that glues down onto the frame. Now, your location for that is a frame member that you had to attach to the frame and two cab supports that you attach to the frame. And flipping it over, you can see there is the frame member. Oh, and there goes the hood I forgot to take off. And the two cab supports are buried in there underneath the engine. Now, with that done, the cab is on. I sighted, and I thought my cab was pretty well plumb, true in X, and let's call this X and X and Y. Looking at it, so that we're horizontal and vertical. Z will be up and down. Woohoo! Anyway, I thought I was good on all my axes, but I was a little off. And as I moved forward, I had that was a little off, which was mostly on me. But the front end of my frame, I didn't realize that wasn't quite right either. So I was trying to correct for two things at once. And I thought I had it pretty well in line. And in the finished step here, the hood drops in, and when you look at that alignment, that does look pretty good. There is no ledge, there is no gap, and what I wound up doing is using my hood as the reference plane, let's say, to sight the radiator. With the radiator sighted to the cab, I then knew my hood would be true, or I should say my hood side panels would be true, and I knew my fenders would be true. To get the radiator true, you saw in the JPEGs, I did some shimming and whatnot. In actual execution, I overdid that, and it is, I guess, a little hard to see on camera, but you will notice that my cab and front end actually lean up. Looking at it from the front end, so this is the bumper, my cab is lifted on the passenger side. What can you do? But with that said, as far as the way the hood sits, I have nice seam lines there. There's no big gap. And, you saw in the JPEGs when I started, I had big angle gaps. I had major alignment issues all over the place. That wasn't good. So, hey, best laid plans. I was able to true out most of it, but it did take some work. Certainly my stock styrene came in handy. You can always use styrene from the sprues in the kit. It was a lot easier using the stock styrene. One, because aesthetically it blends better, but two, you're using something of a defined size, so it's easier to gauge just how far you're going to go with truing up. Now, the way I sighted it was, obviously I had the cab glued in. I then would lay in the radiator with my shims, use the hood to rest that down, because then I knew once the hood was resting well on the cab and resting well on the flange of the radiator, then I knew these were at least true to each other. Then I could shift the bottom of the radiator to make sure I had perpendicular lines for my side panel on the hood. And then last but not least was truing up the fenders to the gap between the radiator and the fender itself in there. So yeah, it took a little juggling. It definitely took some patience. In terms of, was there like a big, modeling skill test? Yeah, moderate. I'll say moderate, because it did take some time to play, and it does take a little confidence when you're doing these things that you're trending in the right direction, but you do it step by step. You be patient and understanding that it probably won't be perfect, but it will be good enough. One thing I would add to that, which is almost kind of funny, sometimes when you watch build videos, you'll see people go through these exhaustive lengths to build, like a beat up looking vehicle that's been all banged up and twisted and all this. With this kit, if you want to build that, just build it out of the box, which probably was not AMT's design intent, but that's basically what you would end up with. Now, that also depends, of course, how you want to interpret the kit. So, joking aside, it definitely takes work to get this going. Also, these side mirrors, a lot of the details on the cab, there are no locator marks, there are no indicator, no locator pins, no indicators as to where to locate these things. You're doing it all by sight and measurement, and that's because this kit has probably gone through a number of iterations for different kinds of trucks or whatnot based on this. So that goes with it. Now here I had mentioned before the two canisters on the side of the cab. Now the reason I said I was concerned about the location, you can see here there's just this little gap between this tank and the fender. And if you're a little too low, you're going to hit the fender. If you're a little too far forward, the bracket, will be overhanging on the ledge of the hood side. So you got to keep in mind those things where they're going. I noticed, I should say, I had put in a JPEG. You probably noticed that I started doing decals already. Yes, normally I wait till the end, but given the size of the kit, and it is getting fairly substantial in the weight category, so not always easy to balance and do decals and things like that. So it seemed easier to do it with a little less on the kit. Certainly with the sides of the hood, it seemed to make a lot more sense doing them while I could just lay them independent and flat on my build board, but also put the two of them next to each other so I could make sure as mirror images, being on opposite sides of the truck, that they sided up their details in a similar fashion. So that's that. Now, let's talk about some of the fun stuff with some details. Now, I did go, and you'll notice some more dry rub decals just to add a little more detail to things, a little bit on the mud flap there, a few little things here and there, again, just to dress it up. Otherwise, the decals are out of the box that came with the kit. The only real, if you want to call it serious, but serious extra detailing I did was on the front end here with our little dump truck mascot. Now, you may think this looks a little crazy. In New York State, where I live, particularly around New York City, I've noticed this. You see trucks and they take these giant stuffed animals that people have trucked out and have been put in the trash, and they'll string them up to the front, and it's it's a kooky kind of thing, but I guess make their trucks a little more friendly looking or whatever. But with this kit, since I was doing some extra detailing on it, I figure why not give this truck a little companion, a little mascot on the front. Now, you notice in the JPEG, I did bump out the front bumper. This piece that I used is actually part of the kit, the dump truck kit, but it is an extra. So I figure, why not? I'll use that. I spaced the hood out, the fender, the front bumper out This gap actually should not be there, but because of the extra piece to lengthen the frame for Mr. Bear to sit on, there it is. So, and that was a relatively simple modification or extra detail, adding one piece, roping the chain around. I did add a little Tamiya brown panel liner to the Bear just to give him a little more definition. And, you know, I think it's a somewhat comical but neat little addition to the build. And since, you know, like I said, I am doing a little bit of a glam version of the truck here, so having that little extra bit seemed to fit in and look okay. So, and I'll have the details as to where I got Mr. Bear and the chain and stuff at the end of the video. You'll see that down in the details area. So that's where things are at. Now, this may sound like a lot of knocks or negativity about the kit. I don't look at it that way. It's just the reality of doing this build. And I'm not really going to get into that much more for now. This was more the segment about builder beware and getting it together. When the kit is done, then, you know, I'll as usual, give my final evaluation of, at least my final evaluation of the kit as a building experience. But I guess to sort of tip that off, I am pretty happy with the color scheme and the way it's coming out. And, you know, we'll see. I got to do the back end here, the dump box and the frame to set that up. I know there's some warp issues there already, I believe. I believe, you know, that I pretty well have them in check, but I will certainly see once it comes time to deal with that. The front of the truck is done. I just have to do the exhaust riser, and then that's all set. And yeah, so looking pretty good, I believe. And underneath, you know, it is a nicely detailed kit. And oops, I got some shifted the tire on the wheel there. I'll have to straighten that out because they just fitted on there. But yeah, it's coming along, and I am looking forward to seeing it in its final form. So I will call it quits at that and get back to building. This one is taking a little bit longer than I thought, but hey, that's fine. No biggie. So I shall return. All right. Thanks for watching. Thought I would get back into JPEGs, but right away a few little things came up, and I just thought it'd be easy to do it talking than in pictures. So let's get to it. Now, you see here the instructions for building the dump box. Now, a good portion of that I had built before painting, which is the basic structure of the box. But as far as adding the pivot plates and the piston and stuff like that, that I did not do. Now, what I wanted to look at when I was getting ready to move into this phase was how all this is siding to the frame. Reason being, let's get our truck in frame here. Reason being, if you do not have the dump bed sided correctly to the frame, when the bed or the trunk, the dump truck body folds down, or you try to place it, it's going to hit the back of the cab, and you're going to have a problem. You also see here, I started with the exhaust stack. I stopped because I'm going to do that last, as it's not really clear where exactly I'm going to need to place that so that I do not bind into the dump box as well. So while I was looking at the parts, now these are the rails that the dump body will sit on, and then these attached to the frame. You know, what I was looking for is, I said when doing alignments, you need that one spot or that one alignment that you know is solid and true, and then you can build everything else around it in reference to it. And with the dump body, it comes down to, and I hope this will come into focus, you will see, there it is, this one little ledge on the rail underneath the bed. That's what's going to site everything. Because when you lay that down on the frame, you now have a point where you say, okay, that's as far forward as it goes, and that's the location. So it's a little thing to find, but it is there. And I scratched my head a little bit, but when I looked at the instructions, you can see just a little nub of the drawing showing that that's your locator. But, you know, when you're doing things like this, again, you know, test fit, test fit, test fit. It never hurts to take your parts, mock things up, and see, oh, okay. And, you know, if you're not real 100% from the instructions the way it's going to go, you start to mock up pieces and actually touching and putting things in place, it'll become real clear real fast. So, point to watch for. Now, here is the little frame where the dump piston is going to sit, and that will be nestled between these frame members atop the actual truck frame. So, last thing I wanted to mention in this short piece, these are the pieces for the piston ram. Now, I found this kind of odd because this is the outermost piston, or the main chamber for the piston. That's the secondary, and then last is the lift arm itself, and of course, it's cross-section because you have to build in to seal each of the piece for the telescoping action. But what I thought was really odd is, for all the chrome parts in the kit, two pieces that are chromed, but in, you know, on an actual truck, when you look at hydraulics, and they're not. They just did them in white plastic, which I thought was really kind of strange because you're going to have to paint them. And then, you know, the problem, and I've done this in the past with models, when you have telescoping pistons and you have to paint the shaft, you know, to get that metallic look, it starts to scratch, and, you know, it's constantly touching up and in need of attention. You know, it is a model, so, you know, it's not going to be like played with where this thing is constantly up and down, but it's just, you know, it's something to consider when you spend the effort to get something looking the way you want, put the detail and the paint in there, and then as soon as you try to, you know, display or something, that you're now scratching your paint. So why at least the middle section and the end piece were not done in chrome, you know, I really couldn't tell you, but be that as it may, that's the way it is. So, gonna get to work, gotta do some painting. There's some odds and ends pieces that I hadn't painted yet, so I'm gonna spray those, and hopefully this will go together 1, 2, and 3, and we'll be in final build. So, yeah, I expect a few JPEGs, and then we'll get the final product. Okay, so back to work. Okay, so this will probably be my last little talk before final reveal. So, the reason I wanted to jump in here, as you can see, there's only a few pieces left over here, and then the truck is done. But what I wanted to talk about is aligning the bed, the dump body, to the frame. Now, in the instructions, we have our usual spaghetti arrows, rectilinear spaghetti here, showing, it all just goes on. And as I mentioned in the last video segment, there is this one little reference marker on the dump rail here to mount the dump body. But citing that, you got to be careful because you want to make sure everything lines up so that your dump body in relation to the truck, so let's say this is the length of the chassis, you don't want your dump body askew because then it'll lift diagonally off to the side instead of in an angle, direct to the chassis. So the other thing is you want to make sure that you have enough clearance between the end of the cab and the front of the dump body. Now this is all kind of drooping here, and I'll show you why in a second. So what I did was I attached those rails to the dump body with the shaft they're going to sit on. Nothing's glued. It's all just laying there. And what this will show me is, and you can see where I've cleared the plastic on the truck, the chassis, where I should sit this along the length of the chassis so that I don't bump into the cab. So by just laying it on there, and this isn't like exactly scientific, but we get a notion of where to set it, guiding by the fender guards for the wheels, the space in the cab, and then we just have to make a mark in the back where the rails should sit, and then that's it. So I'm going to get to doing that, get these last few pieces together, and then it's final assembly reveal. Okay, so that's that. Okay, and here we go. At long last, the completion of the AMT Autocar Dumptruck. So, there we go. Now, I think it came out pretty cool. As usual, I am pretty happy with the result of my build. And, if you're going to do these things, you should be happy with your build as well. So, lecture aside, let's talk about the kit. Now, you can see here, now that it's all done, the way the two-tone paint shapes up. And I think, I was a little uncertain how the two greens might work together. I think now that it's all built up, it's looking pretty good. The two pieces up top, the wood retainers on the bed, I did go in, and because they were molded with wood tone, I did paint and then dry brush the darker brown on top to bring that out. Nice little feature there. The mud flaps I had mentioned in the JPEGs for the build, and you can see how those came out. Pretty nice as well. The decals, as I mentioned, basically out of the kit, except for the dry rub decals, to add those little bits of detail in there. And also we have our mascot chained to the front here, clinging on for dear life. But otherwise what you see is stock out of the box. Now, what was it like to build the kit? And you will probably notice as it's going around, there are a few things that are still not quite true in terms of straight and level. As I said in a prior segment, the kit actually goes together well. There are good locator marks. There are locator pins for a lot of the major assemblies until until you get to a lot of the detail work, at which point there are no locator marks and no indicator marks and no locator pins. As I mentioned with the cab, these multi-piece side mirrors, which were quite an adventure to get on there. So even though the kit in its beginning seems like it's going to go together really well, it certainly throws you its challenge later on when you get to the detailing of the kit with the smaller exterior parts, which is kind of a shame because those are the parts, probably more than any other, you would like to have some locators, because you don't want the exterior to, look like a mess when you build it up. It's a mixed bag, this kit. Now, I had mentioned a couple of times during this video the trumpeter hemp tractor, and if you watch that build video, which is one of my earlier builds, you'll see when that kit went together, everything was spot on. Everything was straight, everything built up true, everything aligned, and the kit is twice as expensive as this one, similar parts count. So, there are certain things to consider when you see the price scale of different kits out there. Sometimes you do get something different for the money you spend on your kit. Obviously, this is buildable. It certainly gives you a neat machine when you're done, but you will have to put in that extra effort, and it will take some extra time and patience, which is why I said at long last, because there were several times with this kit when I sat and I just played with parts. I just laid them up to try to see which way I had to go to correct things, which way to true them up. Now again, as I've said oftentimes, I like to build at a bit of a slower pace, but in this case, I found that was really to my benefit, because if you are building this and you kind of rush through the steps, you're going to run into some pretty significant problems later on that may be very difficult to correct. So, the kit as a building experience, pluses and minuses there. As a final result, I think it speaks for itself. But it will take that little bit of experience to get through it and get to where you want to be. And like I said, half jokingly, but, at the same time, half serious, if you want to build a vehicle that is, kind of beat up and been through the ringer and maybe smashed into things a few times so that nothing is straight on it. And indeed, if you see some older dump trucks on the road, nothing is straight on them. Just build it out of the box and you'll have what you're looking for. But that's all how you choose to interpret the kit. Now, in terms of, my final appreciation of the detail, as I said, it does build up very nice, and you can bring out a lot of it by doing some extra things with the paint. If you had gone with a single tone cab and a single tone bed, as is shown on the box art with that red and then the metallic gray, obviously the painting would be much easier and it would probably mask some of the irregularities in the alignment. But hey, that's your approach. Personally, if I had to do this over, I think I would have painted the chassis the same green to try to bring that out. Detail is really kind of lost under there. And, but hey, a little too late for that now. But otherwise, just letting it take a spin, just with basic painting technique, some black wash. There you go. The dry brush painting to bring out the wood detail, and, planning out the painting, the masking, painting in stages so that we don't have any issues with the paint on the final assembly. And there you go. So, unique subject matter. I don't believe anybody else has a dump truck kit out there. certainly not like this. And, AMT has clearly, when you build the kit, you'll see that AMT has repurposed this several different times. There's a big plus to that because you get a whole lot of extra clear parts when you're done, which are real handy when you're building other kits. And let's say you don't want to be bothered buying clear paints or, futzing around with markers to do certain signal lights, tail lights, whatever. You have those colored clear parts, and then you get 2 whole sprues of these windows here, which, as you can see, you don't use a single piece of them. So, oh no, I'm sorry, I did use 2 for the headlights. So, you get 2 whole sprues of parts there for 2 light lenses, which were the fog lights, I believe, down there. So, you get a nice little piece of surplus there. And you also get some of this tubing they gave you for doing the hydraulic lines. I actually debated a bit with myself as to whether I was even going to use this in the final build, because it is kind of tucked under there, and you'll see when it comes around. Now, if you had gone with a colored chassis, they'd be much more noticeable. And on this rotation, I'm going to actually stop the turntable here, and we'll get a little bit of a closer look. They are the hydraulic lines where I routed them. So, there we go. Now, whoops. Let's tip this guy on this side here. And now you can see some of that real nice underbody detail that comes into the kit. Those hydraulic lines, again with the black, they do get kind of lost, but very nice underbody on this model. And now, 2 things you're probably wondering about. Does the bed lift? Yes, it does. And it will probably lift right out of frame. Now, to keep it up, you can just bend it like that. Kind of gets a little deflection on the piston, and it will hold up. So, we'll let it go around again. And there you go. Now we have the engine compartment, the detailing on the firewall. So there, like I said, there is a lot there to work with on the kit, and you can get a very nice product at the end. And I think I had said it earlier in the build video, there's a funny thing with these AMT kits. As you're working with them, sometimes you really kind of scratch your head and say, boy, they could have done a little bit of extra work on the molds and whatnot to really make it go together well. And, alignment issues, warped pieces, things like that. But, when it's all done, you get something that can build up really great. So, not a first-time kit by any means. And as I had said in the opening of the build, if this is your first build, put it back in the box, build a few other kits, and then come back to this. As a first build, I think this would be very frustrating, and I think very disappointing, and I think it certainly, let's say, misguide you on what to expect with anything you build, because if this is your first impression of the hobby, it's not going to make a very good first impression, unfortunately. But having built a few kits, you'll understand, what you have to do to get it to work out, and it will work out. So, I'm going to drop the bed, cover up the engine once more. And as they say, that's that. So, I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a while getting to this point, but did have a few interruptions in my building. I had mentioned, I was building a bookstore for my authors group, and not actually building a building, but I built a whole bunch of shelving units for the group's books, and getting that all organized and set up. Very happy with that accomplishment, but took a lot of time. So the truck sat here for some time untouched, but hey, now it's done and the videos are up. So by the time this video goes live, I should be, at 2,000 views for total for the channel. And I believe I'm at 36 subscribers. So I just want to say to all of you out there who have been watching and subscribing, once again, a big thank you to you, because that certainly inspires me to do more with this. I'm not on Patreon. I'm not looking at this as a business venture or anything like that. I just wanted to, share the experience of building and, a few of the things I've learned along the way. Not that I'm pretending to be an expert, but, even if it just helps you to see what's in the box to decide whether or not you want to try a kit, hey, happy to be of help. So, trying to pay things forward a bit, let's say. But anyway, thank you for watching, subscribing, all of that great YouTube stuff. Please continue to do so that if you found it helpful, other people can find it helpful. So thanks again. Pat yourselves on the back. And until the next build, I will be back at the table. So enjoy your hobby and goodbye.